The stone beneath my cheek was cold and damp, slick with the night's breath. I woke where I had slumped against the wall, my body stiff, my eyes burning from smoke and broken sleep. The first thing I heard was not the whisper of the sea, nor the bells of Hagia Sophia calling us to prayer, but the hollow groan of stone carrying the memory of bombardment. I pushed myself up, palms rough against the mortar, and looked out across the plain. A sea of tents, stretched in all directions, pale shapes under a thin moon, their outlines dotted by faint fires. The camp of an emperor. It had grown so large it seemed less a camp than a second city. A city come to devour ours. Above it, the sky was a lid of grey, pressed down. Wait. I turned back to the city. Behind me, roofs of tile and wood huddled together, chimneys coughing threads of smoke. Somewhere a dog barked, defiant in the darkness. Somewhere a woman sang to a child, her voice thin but steady. For a moment, if I half closed my eyes, I could pretend this was any morning, bread rising in the ovens, water lifted from the wells, the sea carrying its salt breath through the markets. But then the wind shifted and brought me the sharper scents, the acrid stench of spent powder, the sourness of unwashed bodies pressed too long into narrow spaces, the metallic tang of blood left to dry where it had spilled yesterday on the walls. I stood where my father once brought me as a boy, to watch the procession of the emperor. I remember bright banners snapping in the wind, sunlight catching on helmets and polished steel, the pride that swelled in my chest. Those same walls now bore scars, chunks gnawed by the mouth of the great bombard, the very stones sagging like tired shoulders. Pride had thinned to something tighter, smaller. Survived. A shadow passed beside me. Marcos, a sailor turned soldier, his beard black with ash. He pressed a hunk of bread into my hand, rough and dense, more chaff than wheat. "Eat," he said, his voice like gravel. "You'll need it." I chewed though my throat was tight. Each bite tasted of dust. The city was not yet awake, not fully, but the wall never slept. Men shuffled in armor patched with leather. Women carried buckets of water. Priests whispered prayers as they walked the line. Every figure moved slowly, as though afraid to break the brittle shell of quiet that clung to the stones. And then it came. The sound rolled over us like thunder born from the earth itself. A deep, hollow roar, followed by a cracking that splintered through stone and bone alike. The wall beneath me trembled, dust lifting in small puffs, pebbles dancing on the parapet. Far down the line men shouted, and through the haze I saw the spark of fire blooming from the monstrous barrel that faced us. The great cannon had spoken again. The boy near me, no more than 15, cheeks still round with youth, flinched and pressed his hands to his ears. His lips moved, shaping words I couldn't hear. Prayer, plea, perhaps both. I gripped the parapet, feeling the vibration still singing in my fingers. Smoke rose in the distance, thick and black where the ball had struck. Another wound in the skin of our city. Another step closer to the end we did not name aloud. I forced myself to breathe, to look past the dust, past the flame, back into the heart of Constantinople. The domes and spires glowed faintly in the paling sky. Hagia Sophia's great dome seemed to float, unshaken, as if the prayers gathered beneath it could hold back the ruin pressing at our gates. I clung to that sight like a drowning man clings to driftwood. For an instant, just an instant, I thought I heard the faint echo of its bells. Not real, not yet, but memory layered on the present. Bells for morning, bells for life as it once was, bells for a city not yet broken. Then the second roar came, closer, and the stones beneath me shivered again. Dust filled my mouth, and I knew dawn had begun, and it would not be like other dawns. At first light the wind turned, and the city's breath blew back upon us. It carried the sour of old smoke, the sweet of crushed figs from a cart that had tipped in the messe, the iron tang from yesterday's blood that had dried to a thin varnish on the stone. I licked grit from my lip and found tallow there too. I must have rubbed my mouth with my knuckles in my sleep. A tallow man becomes a candle himself. Even on the walls I smelled like shop and hive. "Eat the rest," Marcus said, nodding at the bread I had tucked into my belt. He had a sailor's posture still, knees loose as if the wall could pitch under him, and he would take it as a deck takes a wave. He tore the heel and handed it back to me, so that I would not refuse. Mothers say chew before fear eats it for you. His grin showed soot in his beard like frost reversed. We set to the small work that keeps a city standing. Small, not because it is light, but because it is made of short movements. Lift, wedge, tamp, tie. The boy with the candle flame face ferried water between bridges, carefully keeping his head below the coping, learning the wall's particular way of sparing a man who keeps low. I patched a fissure with clay and ash, palms blackened, felt the seam sigh under the heel of my hand, as if grateful. Below, the Ottoman camp woke in layers. First the whisper of canvas and rope, then the fuss of animals, then voices, many and mingled, Turkish, Arabic, words from farther than I knew the earth could carry speech. By the time their drums gave two lazy answers to the morning, the fires along their lines showed smoke as ordered as a scribe's lines. We had grown used to this. That was the strangest part. Even the enormous becomes ordinary when it repeats. I left the breach to fetch more rope from the tower store, and crossed the walk where the city's inside sounds climbed to the top. A woman somewhere below was washing a courtyard with seawater, and the slap of the bucket on stone rose clean through powder and sweat. From Hagia Sophia's quarter came the soft lift of chant. The vigil had not ceased in days. I leaned my shoulder on a merlon and let the sound pass through me. It spread something warm behind the breastbone that felt like courage or memory. Likely both. At the stair I met a priest, young, with soot on his cassock, eyes rimmed red, carrying two loaves wrapped in a cloth. He hesitated, then bowed, and pressed one loaf into my hands. A gift from the Grand Church, he said. His voice had the rawness of someone who had spoken all night, for those on the wall. I tried to refuse. He smiled and did not let go until I took it. It is the Emperor's wish, he said, and that made it heavier in my hands. Constantine had ridden the line at dusk the day before, bareheaded, as if he wanted our eyes to recognize his ordinary face. He had spoken to us not as a man speaks to a crowd, but to one name at a time, a word laid in each palm. I am not a court man. I do not use thrown words easily. But what he gave was not title. It was steadiness. In the tower store, the rope bins had thinned. We have learned how quickly a city can consume itself in staying alive. Barrels that once carried wine now held earth. Doors became mantlets, bed frames became braces. An old man, with a scar in the shape of a fish at his temple, signed the rope over to me in a careful hand, as if we would live to audit. When I turned to go, he touched my sleeve. If you pass the Black Anay, tell them we have no more iron nails. Long enough for the frames, he said. Tell them to tear hinges from what's left. In this way, the city spoke to itself short messages, carried on legs that remembered home. Back at the breach, I found Marcos arguing, gently, in two languages. A Venetian with a hat that had once been red wanted his men to hold the right angle. A Greek sergeant wanted it left so he could keep his eye on the gate. Marcos settled it by pointing at the stone. Whatever holds, he said, we will call it yours when we tell God about it later. The Venetian laughed with his shoulders first, then his mouth, and took the right. We fight better, I have learned, when we find the exact size of a joke that will fit between us, and the next impact. The cannon spoke again. We all felt it before we heard it, the way wine feels the foot placed too hard beside the table. A breath, then the cough, then the shove. Dust sifted from the joints like flour from a sleeve. A man at the next crenelle spat and crossed himself 3 different ways to be sure one stuck. I wiped a line clear with my thumb so I could watch the smoke unravel where the ball had struck the outer slope. Somewhere to our left, a cry went up, not panic, but the sharp bark that means, here, help here. I ran without thinking. 3 men and a boy were braced against a shutter where the coping had split. We threw our backs to it and became timber with them until the wall's breadth grew even again. In the lull that followed, a runner came with word from the sea walls. He wore Galata mud on his calves and had cut his sandal thong for speed. Galleys in the Horn, he said between breaths. Not our. We knew this already, had known it since the day we watched the Impossible ships. inching over greased logs down the hill into the sheltered water. Sails furled, oars shipped, like a caravan of fish learning to climb. Still, each time someone said it, "Ships in the Horn," the words tugged hard behind the ribs. The chain lay across the water like a dead serpent now. It held the old place, but what it held back had found another door. "Do they shoot?" Marcos asked. "Enough to make a man walk bent," the runner said, and lifted his palm, which showed a blister where he had pressed it against a warm stone. We took that knowledge the way we took bread, chewed without comment, and let it work into the blood. The men along our length of wall, Latin and Greek, shifted to listen to the horn's new voice, the slap of oars, the sharp cough of smaller guns, the scream of iron ricochet along brick. War speaks in tongues. You learn them by being struck. By late morning, the sun had turned the helmets to a glare. We patted wet cloths over the bolts we meant to draw bare-handed, so our skin would not stick. A boy from the city, no older than 12, hair hacked short with a dull knife, appeared with a tray of small clay cups, vinegar cut with water, a shred of mint, floating like a boat on a tarnished sea. He held out the tray with both hands, the way a novice holds a relic. I took one and felt my mouth come alive again. "Tell your mother," I said. "She makes soldiers of." He scowled as if insulted and said, "It was my idea." Around noon, a whisper worked its way along the battlement about omens. Men have a hunger for pattern when stone splits without warning. Someone said the moon had turned to blood a week ago. He had seen it red behind the cistern roofs, and a prophet had once tied our city's fate to such a moon. I had seen it too, that dull red coin rising, and I could not scrape it from my mind now, though I knew the moon cares nothing for men or walls. Another man swore he had seen a light walking above the dome of the grand church. A third began to tell of saints appearing in armor, and Marcos cut him off with a cough that was almost a laugh. "If saints come," he said, "they will want stones like the rest of us." We lifted. Through the hottest part of the day we hauled timber, tamped earth, carried sloshing buckets along the wall walk, passed them hand to hand over men's heads into the thirsty patches. Sweat ran into my eyes and carried dust with it, making mud there. Every so often a sally port would squeal on its pins, and a knot of our men would spill out with shields to burn a ladder, hack at a ram, or harry the men in the ditch. When they came back, black with soot and smiling with too many teeth, we touched their shoulders with the flat of our hands like blessers. I envied their forward motion and did not. The wall had adopted me, and I could not leave its side. In the afternoon the Emperor came. We felt him before we saw him. The way the men's backs straightened, the way a word ran along the top of the stones. He rode a short horse that lifted its knees high, like a dancer taught to be careful on bad floors. He was not in gold. He wore plate patched where it had been struck and a cloak the colour of ash. He dismounted at the break and climbed the steps on foot like any of us would, moving as if the stones belonged to him because they did. He spoke quietly with Giustiniani, hand on the Genoese captain's forearm, then turned and looked along our length. That was all. He looked, the way a father looks along a table at his sons when he has no wise words left. It was enough. He did speak after to the priest who had walked with him, and the priest traced a cross in the air. Some men crossed themselves left to right, others right to left on this wall. Both gestures meant the same. When he had gone, the camp outside made a new sound. Not drums, not zurna, not iron, a human sound. Many voices shaped into one, rising and falling in a cadence I could not name. The boy cocked his head. "What is it?" he asked. "Practice," Marcus said. "They are teaching their chests to breathe in the same time." Evening crept closer with the long light that makes men look noble and tired. We loaded stones to the parapet for night, knowing that when darkness comes a man throws what his hands have learned best to grasp. The horn's guns worried the sea walls to our north. A fire flared among the sheds there and died quickly. The bucket line working like a river set upright. A gull landed on the wall 2 crinals down, looked at me with a judge's eye, then lifted off without comment. At sunset, I was sent down into the city to carry a message to the Blucanet. Short of nails, short of oil. The stairs felt treacherous after the day atop. Feet schooled to parapet, found dirt too easy. In the Messier line had formed for flour, women with kerchiefs tight under their chins, each holding a sack that had been mended until the cloth had more darning than a saint's robe has prayers. The steward at the warehouse door measured with a care that made you love and hate him at once. His cup did not tremble. A child at the back of the line hummed to herself, the same 2 notes over and again, making a tether for her fear. I wanted to put my hand on her head, and could not because my hand stank of pitch. I passed Hagia Sophia. The doors stood open. The nave was a sea of faces turned upward. The dome hung there like night made into a bowl, and polished. Lamps burned in ranks along the ambulatories, little constellations that refused to move even when the door admitted wind. An icon of the Virgin had been carried along the walls the day before, its silver ribs flashing where torchlight caught. Some said rain had fallen from it. Though the sky was dry, I have seen wood weep resin under heat. Call it miracle or pine. It comforted men either way. A priest brushed my sleeve as he passed. His fingers left a line of ash. At Blachane I found men laying planks across a section where the outer wall's belly had sagged. Their captain, light-haired, scar by his lip, listened to my message and sent back one short word for our tower. Use doors. I laughed though my mouth was raw. On my way back, I cut 3 hinges from a shop whose sign I remembered, a money changer's scale hanging in painted wood. The door came away easy. I lifted it and thought of the hands that had pressed here, citizens counting coin on market mornings, and I apologized to the wood as if it could hear. You will be a brace now, I said, a better use than you have ever known. Twilight lowered its purple lid over the plain. The camp beyond the ditch made ready, not playing at it as in other nights, but drawing itself in. Torches were placed, not waved. Shadows pooled under the stakes. The chant rose again, slow, deliberate, like breath set to a loom. Along our length men ate what was put into their hands, olives wrinkled to the hardness of thought, bread tough enough to pull a tooth, stew that tasted of last night and the night before. We chewed and watched and let quiet buckle our armor. When I regained my place by the gate, the boy had fallen asleep, sitting upright, head against the inner jamb, mouth open in a stubborn child's refusal to lie down. I slid my cloak between him and the wood. Marcos had blackened his face without asking for a mirror. He looked like a saint, rubbed onto a fresco by too many fingers, and smiled like one too. He handed me a strip of dried fish and a clove of garlic as if they were gifts from a king. Listen, he said. I did. The horn's guns thumped slower, lower. The camp's music fell away, one instrument at a time, until only the breath chant remained. Above us, the first stars dared, faint as dust. Somewhere in the city, a donkey brayed with surprising cheer and stopped abruptly, as if shushed by a hand pressed to its warm muzzle. How many nights like this? The boy murmured without opening his eyes. Enough to make this feel like the only kind of night, I said. He made a small sound that might have been agreement or might have been sleep. I envied him either way. In the last light, Giustiani walked the break with 3 of his men, touching each patch with his gloved fingers, feeling the way a physician feels a wrist for pulse. He spoke softly to the men there, and once he laughed, and the laugh moved us like a small, necessary wind. He looked the way a wall would if a wall could stand upright and choose where to lay itself. After full dark, a hush fell so clean it made my teeth ache. No arrows, no javelins, no thrown insults, which are their own weapon when men have breath to spare. Only that measured human sound beyond the ditch, and the faint clink of iron where someone's carelessness met his commander's stare. Marcos tapped my elbow and pointed down. The bar of the postern had a line of dew along its iron edge, trembling with my pulse through the wood. I laid my hand there and felt it calm, then felt it take up a different rhythm. Not mine, not the boys', not Marcos's. A small, testing pressure, the way a stranger touches a door he does not yet mean to walk through. Heartened by quiet, our men along the stretch began to speak to themselves. A man told a story about a fish so large it took a saint to eat it. Another said, when this was done, he would plant olives in soil that had not known boots. The boy asked me whether bees sleep at night or hume in the hive until morning. I told him I'd listened at the hive as a child, cheek to plank. They work whether a man can see him or not. Like us, Marcos said, and the boy smiled without opening his eyes. The moon rose late, shy, smudged by smoke. It turned the plain to spun wool and gave the stakes and spears long, slender shadows that seemed more men than the men themselves. A fox trotted along the bottom of the ditch as if it were any other night, and found a ladder too newly set to carry scent and paused to consider the carpentry. I almost loved it for its ordinary thoughts. Toward midnight, the Emperor rode again, not on the wall this time, but along the inner road, his horse's hooves wrapped in cloth. Someone with him sang a low hymn, and the words braided with the chant from beyond, so that for a moment I could not tell if the two prayers were fighting or holding each other up. We drank little. We slept less. When a man closed his eyes, he saw the breaks behind them, and when he opened them he found the same. I shaped wicks at the back of my mind as I kept watch. Old habit, twisting threads that were not there, teaching my fingers that they would have work again if given the chance. Not long before dawn, the wind shifted once more. It carried the smell of the horn tar heated by hands that had never touched our stones, and under that, something like fennel, and under that fear. The chant from the plain ceased, as if a mouth had been covered by a palm. The boy's eyes snapped open. His breath came short, quick. I could not tell if he had woken or if fear itself wakes a man from outside like a hand on a shoulder. All along the wall, heads lifted. Our stones held their breath. The iron at my palm went still, then began again, this time a fraction deeper, a fraction more certain. In the silence, an owl on the tower let out its questioning note and received no answer. We did not speak. We did not need to. Each man counted his own heartbeats and found them too many or too few. Somewhere to the south a trumpet lifted thin, probing, then fell. Farther north another answered. Between them in the space a single prayer could fit. The drums began, very soft, not the rolling thunder of an afternoon muster, a murmur, a comb through hair. Stand, Marco said, not loud, not soft, just the size of the word required to fit into the space between the next two breaths. I set my palm more firmly on the bar, bent my head until my cheek nearly touched the wood, and listened to a city that had learned to make itself quiet. In that quiet, small things grew huge. The scratch of a rat in the drain, the cluck of a sentry's tongue against his teeth, the sigh a man makes when he thinks of his kitchen table. I could smell beeswax, faint and stubborn, where someone's candle had died on the jamb the night before and left its ghost. The sky found a colour that is not yet light but no longer night. Torches in the plain lifted to meet it in careful ranks. Shields rose like a second wall against our wall. At the far end of our stretch, a figure stepped onto the break and lifted his sword straight up. His armour caught the first idea of day, and made that idea brighter. The bar sang under my hand, thin as a thread drawn over a whetstone. Something, somewhere, had begun to push. The days blurred into one another, each dawn beginning with the thunder of cannon fire, each night closing with prayers whispered under a bruised sky. Constantinople no longer breathed as a city of emperors. It gasped like a wounded creature, its ribs cracking beneath the pounding fists of the great bombard. I slept little. When I did, it was to the lull of falling stone, the cry of men pulled from rubble, the faint drip of water seeping through cracks in the cisterns. I dreamed of streets I once walked freely, markets bright with figs and olives, sailors calling from the harbour, bells ringing without fear, and always I woke to the same grey haze of dust and smoke. The walls bore new scars each morning. We patched them as best we could, timbers dragged from broken houses, barrels of earth heaped into breaches, ropes stretched to pull stone into place. But nothing held long against the thunder. The cannonball did not strike once and rest. It struck again and again, until mortar crumbled, until stone groaned like a man pushed to his knees. Each strike seemed to echo inside my chest. The boy worked beside me now, his face pale beneath the soot that clung to his skin, his hands blistered from carrying stones, but he did not complain. Sometimes his lips moved, murmuring words I could not hear. Sometimes he hummed softly, as if song could carry him above the weight pressing on us. I never asked what tune it was. I feared it was one of home, and home was too fragile a word now. Marcos never stopped moving. His voice boomed along the wall, driving men to lift faster, to haul harder, to fight weariness with rage. He swung his axe at stone as easily as he had swung it at oak, shaping timbers into braces, splitting beams for firewood when the nights grew cold. His laugh came rough, bitter, but it came still, and sometimes that laugh alone kept men from folding where they stood. Yet all of us felt it. The air thickened with something unspoken, something that crept into our bones as the breaches widened and the nights grew shorter. Even when the cannon fell silent, the silence was heavier than sound, as though the earth itself held its breath. On the 12th night, the sky burned red. I had climbed the wall at dawn to see for myself what rumour had carried through the city. Across the plain, torches stretched in long rivers, thousands upon thousands, winding through the Ottoman camp. I counted until my breath failed me, but the line had no end. Fires sprang up where none had been before. Tents spread wider, brighter, banners snapping in the wind. "They are preparing," Marcus said at my side, his arms folded. His eyes gleamed in the firelight, though no joy lived there. "They are gathering for the storm." I nodded, though the words scraped raw in my throat. That night the sky never darkened fully. It glowed with fire, with the smoke of burning pitch, with the restless movement of men gathering for what we all knew must come. From the walls we watched shadows move, lines forming and reforming, weapons gleaming even at that distance. The sound reached us at intervals, the clash of steel on steel, the bray of horns, the chants of soldiers raising voices to heaven or to sultans. The boy leaned against the parapet, his eyes wide. "They are so many," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "Do we stand a chance?" The question cut deeper than the cannon. I could not answer, not with truth. I placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the tremor beneath his tunic. "We stand while we must," I said softly. "That is all a man can do." He nodded, though I knew the words did not ease him. Perhaps they did not ease me either. Inside the city, fear had grown teeth. The markets were hushed, stalls empty, the air heavy with the stench of rot as food dwindled. Bread came hard, dark, cut thin as parchment. Water tasted of stone and mould. In the churches, candles burned without cease, their wax pooling thick on the floors, the smoke stinging eyes already raw from dust. Voices rose in hymns louder each night, as though sheer force of sound might bend the ear of heaven. Yet still, life clung. Children played in alleys, their games muted but stubborn. Lovers met in shadows, clinging to what warmth they could steal. Old men told tales of emperors past, though their voices quavered, their eyes far away. Even as walls shook, even as gates strained, Constantinople refused to surrender its breath. On the 27th night, the city fell silent in a way I had never known. No cannon fired, no torches flared. The Ottoman camp lay still, a vast sea of shadows under the moon. Men stood along our walls in hush, gripping weapons, their ears straining for a sound that did not come. The silence pressed heavy, heavier than bombardment, heavier than screams. Marcos spat over the wall. "They are waiting," he muttered. "For what?" the boy asked. "For dawn," I whispered, and dawn came, pale and thin, carrying no sound but the sigh of wind over stone. Birds wheeled overhead, startled by nothing, their cries sharp in the quiet. The city seemed to hold its breath, every soul waiting for the sky to break. That night, the priests marched through the streets with crosses high, their voices thick with hymns. The emperor himself walked barefoot to Hagia Sophia, his robes trailing in the dust, his crown left behind. People gathered behind him, their faces lit by candles, their voices raw with prayer. I walked among them, my chest tight, my heart swelling with something I could not name, fear, sorrow, love, all tangled together. Inside Hagia Sophia, the dome glowed with 1,000 candles, the icons shining with reflected fire. Voices rose until they shook the marble, until the very stones seemed to hum with sound. Men and women clutched each other, strangers embracing as though family, tears running down cheeks streaked with soot. I saw Marcus bow his head, lips moving in a prayer I never thought he knew. I saw the boy's eyes glisten as he traced the sign of the cross upon his chest. For a moment, only a moment, the city felt whole again. When dawn came, the silence shattered. Horns blared across the plain. Drums thundered like heartbeats too vast for human chests. Voices roared in unison, rising until they drowned even the cries of gulls above the harbour. The ground trembled beneath the tread of thousands moving as one. I ran to the wall, my lungs burning, my eyes wide. The sight stole what breath remained. They came in waves. Lines of soldiers stretched from horizon to horizon, shields gleaming, spears bristling, banners snapping in the rising sun. Siege towers rolled forward, wheels groaning, their heights matching our walls. Ladders were lifted, their rungs dark with pitch. The janissaries moved like shadows at the front, their ranks perfect, their faces hidden beneath steel and cloth. And at the heart of it, drawn by oxen, groaned the great cannon. Its mouth yawned wide, black and hungry, smoke still staining its rim from the fire of days before. Men swarmed around it, feeding it powder, lifting balls that seemed heavier than fate itself. The wall shuddered beneath me as the first roar split the air. Stone splintered, dust rose, men cried out. The assault had begun. The bar shuddered again beneath my palm, and then the whole gate seemed to breathe. It was not wood now, but lung, ribs, sinew, straining against the thrust outside. I pressed my weight into it with Marcos beside me. Shoulder to shoulder, our backs bent, our breath hot on the oak. The boy was between us, too small to add more than a finger's worth of strength. But he leaned in anyway, as if the gate would shame him if he did not. The sound outside grew teeth. Drums struck faster, sharper, no longer like hair combed, but like fists hammered on iron pots. Trumpets stabbed the air with notes that seemed to pierce even through the stone, turning our chests into hollow chambers. The chant that had haunted us all night became a roar, countless throats trained to move at once, a single sea crashing against us, and then the first strike came. The ram's head slammed into the wood with a crack that made the whole wall ring. Dust fell from the coping above. My jaw shivered, my teeth clicked. I tasted copper as if the blow had loosened my gums. Another strike and another. The rhythm steady, unhurried, as if they had all the time in the world to batter us open. Stones! Someone cried from above. We heard the scrape and slide as men shoved blocks from the parapet down onto the ram below. The crash of stone against shield. The grunt of men crushed. Then a scream cut short. For a moment the beating faltered, then resumed. Slower, heavier, as if the ram itself had grown angry. Arrows began to rattle against the merlins. Some found gaps, whistling past our ears to snap against the inner wall. A man 2 places down cried out, his hand clutching his shoulder where a shaft had buried itself. Blood seeped between his fingers. He sagged, but another man caught him under the arm and held him upright, unwilling to let even a wound create space in our line. From the breach to our left came the deep cough of the great gun, and then the shriek as stone split. Men shouted over the thunder, calling for braces, ropes, timbers. The wall shook like a table struck by a drunkard's fist. We pressed harder into the bar, as if by holding it we held the city itself together. The gate creaked like a living thing, its timbers crying out with each blow. I could feel splinters working into my palm, sharp, hot, but I dared not loosen my grip. Beside me, Marcos grunted, sweat streaking down his soot-blackened face, teeth bared in a grimace that might have been a smile. The boy whimpered once, then bit his lip until it bled, choosing silence. Above, oil poured from a cauldron, hissing as it struck shields below. A chorus of screams rose, and the smell of burning hair reached us almost at once, sharp and vile. Smoke swirled upward, catching in our throats, making eyes weep even without grief. "They climb," someone shouted. I glanced through the murder slit. Ladders shuddered against the wall. Men swarming upward like ants on sugar. Their helmets gleamed dully in the first grey of dawn, their cries weaving into the thunder of the ram. Spears jabbed down from our side, pushing at the ladders, trying to tilt them back. A ladder buckled, spilling men into the ditch, but 2 more rose to replace it. A stone landed near me, rolling across the walkway with a hollow thump. I bent and seized it, its weight pulling at my arms, and hurled it over the parapet. I did not see where it struck, but I heard the crunch, the scream, and then nothing. My stomach turned even as my hand reached for another. War makes a man's body quicker than his conscience. The gate shuddered again, louder, a splinter breaking loose and biting into my forearm. I hissed but did not move. My arms were numb now, my shoulders fire. Around us men shouted prayers, half in Greek, half in Latin, some only groans without words. And then the gate gave. A crack ran down its face like lightning across the sky. A sliver of light pierced through, thin as a knife blade, but enough to show the truth. Wood cannot hold forever. A roar answered from outside as if thousands had seen that sliver with us. The ram struck again, widening the crack. Splinters flew like hornets. "They are through," someone cried. "Hold!" Giustiniani's voice bellowed from above, sharp as steel striking steel. He was there, sword drawn, his broad figure outlined in the dim light. "Hold," and the wall holds. Men surged to the gate, bracing it with beams, pressing with shoulders, driving wedges into the ground to stall the ram's bite. For a moment the assault faltered. But then another thunderclap shook the breach to our left, and stone gave way with a scream like tearing cloth. Dust boiled upward, turning the air into fog. Through it, shapes moved, helmets, shields, spears, Ottoman soldiers pouring into the gap like water through a broken dam. The fight became hand to hand. Steel clashed against steel, the ring sharp and brutal. Men shouted, cried, gasped, groaned. I saw Marcus swing his axe, the blade catching a helmet and splitting it, blood spraying across the wall walk. A Venetian to my right drove a pike into a man's chest, the force lifting him backward off the stones. The boy held a spear with both hands, thrusting clumsily, face pale but eyes blazing. I seized a hammer, once meant for carpentry, now for war, and swung it down on a shield that rose before me. The shock jolted up my arm. The man behind the shield staggered, and Marcos finished him with a thrust. My heart pounded so loud it drowned the drums. My breath came ragged, smoke and blood filling my mouth until I could not tell them apart. The gate splintered further, men scrambling to wedge more beams, but already a hand thrust through, fingers clawing. A sword followed, stabbing blindly. Someone hacked the hand off, and the stump withdrew with a howl. Blood sprayed through the crack, speckling our faces, and then the ladders topped the parapet. Men swarmed over, shouting their god's name, blades flashing. We met them with spears, with stones, with anything a hand could lift. The boy was knocked down, his spear clattering away. I dragged him up by the collar, shoving him behind me as a sword cut the air where his head had been. I swung the hammer again, and the man fell, his face gone. My stomach clenched, bile rising, but there was no time for sickness. Around us the wall became chaos. Clashing steel, screams, the hiss of arrows, the crack of stone. Giustiniani fought like a wall himself, his great frame blocking the breach, his sword cutting arcs of light through the smoke. Men rallied to him, pressing forward, holding the gap. But then came the cry that broke us. "The captain is down." I turned and saw him, Giustiniani staggering, blood pouring from his side, where an arrow had pierced through the joint of his armor. His men caught him, dragging him back. Panic rippled like fire through dry straw. Men faltered, some stepping back, some shouting to retreat. The wall seemed to groan, as if even stone could feel despair. Marcus cursed, swinging harder, shouting, "Hold! He still lives! Hold!" But the rhythm had changed. The enemy pressed harder, sensing the falter. The ram struck again, and this time the gate burst inward, the beams splintering, the bar snapping in two. They poured through, the street behind us filled with steel and shouting. Torches flared, smoke rolling into the city. The sound of hoofbeats echoed, horses driven through the breach, riders swinging curved blades that gleamed even in the murk. We fought, not as soldiers now, but as men defending their last doorway. I swung until my arms felt like rope, until the hammer slipped from my grasp slick with blood, mine or another's I could not tell. I seized a spear, thrust, pulled back, thrust again. My world narrowed to inches. The glint of an enemy's eye, the arc of a blade, the hot spatter across my cheek. The boy was beside me, stabbing with a knife now, his spear lost. His face was streaked with soot and tears, but his jaw was set. Marcos roared like the sea, his axe rising and falling, each blow a prayer made of iron, but the tide was too many. They climbed over the fallen, pressed through the gap, spilled along the wall walk and into the city. Bells rang frantically, the sound swallowed by the roar of men and drums. Smoke thickened, flames leaping where oil had caught. I saw the city behind us, the domes, the narrow streets, the rooftops where families huddled watching with wide, silent eyes. Hagia Sophia's dome glimmered faintly in the dawn, serene above the chaos, as if refusing to notice the storm breaking below. For a heartbeat, I thought of my shop, the smell of beeswax and smoke, the rows of candles waiting to be lit. I thought of my mother's hand guiding mine as I twisted wicks, her voice humming low. I thought of a life before rams and ladders and screams. Then another wave struck and thought was gone. The wall became nothing but survival. Strike, block, shove, breathe. My arms burned, my chest heaved, my vision blurred with sweat and smoke. Around me men fell, some with cries, some silent. A body pressed against my leg, heavy, limp. I could not look down. Back, someone shouted. To the second wall. But the second wall was already breaking. Men streaming through alleys, chased by steel. The city itself seemed to reel, its stones groaning under the weight of fire and fear. Marcos caught my arm, dragging me toward the stair. The boy stumbled after, clutching his knife. We half ran, half fought, pushing through the crush of bodies, our men retreating, theirs pressing. Arrows hissed past. A torch landed nearby, sparks leaping. The air roared with fire. At the base of the stair I turned once, just once, and saw the gate fully broken, its timbers sprawled like ribs torn apart. Through it poured a tide of men, endless, relentless, their banners snapping, their cries rising like a storm tide. Above them the dawn sky burned red, as if the very morning had caught fire. The city had opened, and we were inside its breaking. The sound of the gates breaking still lived in my chest as we stumbled deeper into the city. Though my ears had grown numb with noise, everything had become sound and shadow. The clang of steel on steel, the thud of boots pounding stone, the wails that rose and fell like tides, the smell of smoke wrapping itself into every fold of my clothes, every breath, every memory. We ran through alleys where shutters banged in the wind of passing feet, where doors burst open to spill families into the streets. Mothers dragged children by the arms, faces pale as plaster, their cries piercing the thunder around us. Some clutched icons, painted faces of saints, lifted toward the sky as if heaven itself might descend and close the wound in the wall. Some carried nothing but fear, their hands empty, eyes wide. Marcus still had his axe, its edge black with ash and darker things. The boy stumbled, tripped, caught himself, then ran harder, his knife glinting though it was useless against the tide now, pouring into every crack of Constantinople. I felt the hammer gone from my hand, the weight still ghosting my arm, as if my fingers still clenched around it though it had fallen long before. We reached a square where the air shifted, filled with the low continuous roar of voices. Not Greek now, but Ottoman. The sound of victory already being claimed though the fight was still in our throats. Torches flared, casting monstrous shadows on the walls of nearby houses. Smoke unfurled upward, turning the morning sun to a red smear in the sky. The city was burning. Hagia Sophia rose in the distance, its great dome still serene, as if untouched, as if above the ruin of men. Crowds pressed toward it, drawn like iron to a lodestone, believing the sanctuary would hold even if the walls could not. I felt the pull myself, my feet turning toward that dome, though my reason whispered it was folly. A crash behind us. I turned to see flames leap from a row of shops, the thatched roofs catching quick as kindling. A woman screamed, running with her arms outstretched, her dress trailing sparks. Men followed, shouting words I could not understand, their blades flashing as they overtook her. The scream cut short. The boy looked away, jaw clenched, but his hand clung to my sleeve until his knuckles whitened. We pressed onward, through alleys, twisting like veins through the city's heart. At each corner came new sights. A priest standing firm before his church, a cross lifted high until an arrow dropped him to his knees. A merchant's cart overturned, its goods trampled under boots. A soldier stripped of armor, begging with his hands raised before steel ended his plea. And still, the tide pressed on. We reached the steps of Hagia Sophia. The crowd there surged like the sea, thousands pressing toward its doors, voices raised in cries and prayers. Children clung to mothers, men lifted their hands, faces streaked with ash and tears. Some carried torches, not to burn but to light their way into the vastness within, as if light alone could guard them. Marcus pushed us through the throng, his voice rough as he shouted, "Make way! Make way!" But the crowd was too thick, too desperate. Bodies pressed chest to back, shoulder to shoulder, until breath itself became hard to find. The boy clung to me, his small frame nearly swallowed in the crush. Inside, the vast nave spread wide, its dome soaring above like heaven's vault. Light streamed through high windows, dimmed by smoke, turning gold to bronze. The air vibrated with sound, prayers chanted, cries lifted, voices tangled into a single roar of despair and hope. Icons glowed dimly in the half-light, faces of Christ and Mary watching with calm eyes, as if even they could not intervene. I stood beneath that dome, my chest heaving, sweat and ash stinging my eyes. I remembered coming here as a child, my hand in my mother's, the space so wide it felt like stepping into the sky itself. Now the sky trembled with the tread of boots and the crack of fire. The marble floor was slick with sweat, with tears, with the scuff of boots pressed too tight. A priest's voice rose, strong at first, then faltering as the doors shuddered. The tide had found us. Blows rattled against the great bronze doors, voices outside swelling, laughter and triumph mingling with rage. "They cannot come in here," someone whispered near me. "This is God's house. God will not allow it." But the doors had already begun to crack. Marcos set his back against a pillar, his axe across his knees, eyes hard. The boy clutched his knife with both hands, shaking, his lips moving in prayer, though no sound came. I stood between them, my palms empty now, my chest hollow. I felt the weight of centuries pressing into this 1 hour. The city of Constantine, jewel of the empire, reduced to smoke and cries and fear. The doors gave way. They came in like floodwater, their boots striking marble, their banners unfurling beneath the dome. Steel flashed in the dim light. Voices rang, laughter rose. The crowd shrieked, scattered, pressed deeper into the nave, into chapels, into corners where there was no corner enough. I saw a woman lift her child high, her arms trembling, her voice rising in plea. A sword cut her down, the child slipping from her grasp into the press. I saw men dragged by their hair, women pulled screaming, priests cut down before their icons. The marble floor ran dark, the sound of prayers swallowed by steel. I pulled the boy close, shielding him with my body. Marcos rose, his axe swinging once, twice, before steel pierced his chest. He staggered, his eyes wide, his mouth opening as if to speak, but only blood came. He fell at my feet, his hand still clutching the axe. I bent, seized it, though its weight nearly broke me. I swung once, wildly, not to kill but to live one breath more. The axe slipped, struck stone, sparked, and was gone from my hand. Rough hands seized me, struck me, dragged me down. The boy screamed, his knife flashing, but he was torn from me, swallowed by the press of bodies. The dome loomed above, serene still, its gold fading into smoke. I lay on the marble, my breath shallow, my limbs heavy. Around me the city fell, not street by street now, but heart by heart, breath by breath. The empire's last jewel cracked beneath boots, its last song sung in screams. And yet, through the roar, through the cries, I thought I heard again the faint toll of bells. Not real, not struck by any hand, but memory echoing across stone, bells for morning, bells for prayer, bells for a city that had stood 1,000 years and now lay broken. The smoke thickened, the sound rose, my vision dimmed. Still, in that last moment, one image lingered, the dome of Hagia Sophia unbroken, serene, floating above ruin, like a fragment of heaven, refusing to fall. And I knew the city was gone. You've been listening to Lost Sapien. If you'd like to hear the next voice time almost forgot, subscribing will bring it to you.